good morning, good evening, good afternoon again from wherever you are joining from different parts of the world. We are so grateful to all be together today here and in conversation with Dr. Maki Sayonji Kawamura. So, welcome and thank you for joining us. The purpose of these talks is to share stories that help plant seeds for a more compassionate society while fostering our own inner transformation. And we do this by holding collective conversations with guest speakers from all walks of life who just inspire us to live in a more service oriented way. And I want to thank the entire team of service space volunteers who is behind each of these calls, whose invisible work allows us to hold this space in this way. And so today in conversation with Dr. Maki San, and so in the first part of our call today, just to give you an overview of the call flow, we have our two very special friends and volunteers, Marilyn and Yogesh, who will engage in a moderated Q&A with Maki on the topic of death and dying and the stories, the numerous stories of death and dying, which she has seen from a very close quarters. And in the second part, we'll open up the circle for questions and reflections from all of you. So at any point during the talk, we welcome you to offer a question or a reflection via the comment box in the live stream page. And thank you for joining us. And let us start our prayerful time together with a minute of silence. Welcome back. In conversation with Maki from Japan. And today our call is moderated by Yogesh from India, who is a leading behavioral scientist and a very heartful facilitator whose work over the years has touched tens of thousands of people. And he's also a past Weekend Talk speaker. And Marilyn from US, who is a very big-hearted volunteer. And just as we saw a few minutes before, also her love for animals and especially animals with special needs is been such a profound inspiration for so many of us. So thank you, Yogesh and Marilyn. And thank you to Maki, who is, I'm just so delighted to share just a little bit about her before we jump onto the conversation. And so Maki is from Japan, but she grew up in America and Germany, where her high school experience led her to pursue a career in medicine as a pediatrician. And apart from an MD degree in Japan, in the medical field, she also spent a year studying Eastern medicine. And that combination gave her really powerful insights that it is not just the that the curative capacities of human mind and heart just to also heal and transform the body. She is the managing director of Goi Peace Foundation in Japan that brings together people in wisdom, united in their hearts towards the common goal of peace on earth. Many of us on this call and much beyond have been deeply touched by the prayer, "May peace prevail on earth," which Maki and her family have planted and cultivated very deeply in their own hearts and across the world. Witnessing her grandfather's passing away at a very young age left an enduring mark in Maki's heart, and that sort of made a deep understanding of death and dying, a very central aspect of her life. And that has very powerfully rippled out into all the work which she has done. Few years ago, she started a House of Joy, which is to support people's journey through cancer. And also in the last 1 or 2 years, they have begun a hospice now and here to more deeply support people and families in the death and dying process. And just as you, I think, as anyone spends a little bit of time with Maki, one or two things become very clear. Like one of the volunteers, even in our previous call, was saying that if you just see Maki, she comes with such a tremendous heart of gratitude that even for the simplest things, she will express so much gratitude to us. And I think it is just such a powerful reminder of just her, I think, moment to moment living gratitude for life, to see the preciousness of life and of each moment. And the other thing is that which really inspires and intrigues me and so many people is the ability to see a lot of pain and lot of suffering and be very deeply amidst that pain and suffering, uh, to witness it from a close quarters, but to not be bogged down by it, but to not shut by it, but to meet it with a lot of courage, but with a lot of gentle courage and openness and love, which is something which we all aspire to learn from her. And we are very grateful for our time together today. So with that, I am going to pass it on to Madeline and Yogesh to lead us to our uh, time together. Thank you so much all for joining, and look forward.
Thank you, Rohit. Maki, I am so grateful to spend this time with you today, and so honored to be here. And to start, you have such an inspiring journey. And we were wondering if you could share with us about the part of your journey where you became a doctor, and then you were moved to start the House of Joy to support cancer patients, and then more recently to start the Here and Now Hospice.
So good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everybody who has joined today. And I really appreciate for you to come and then go deeply, go try to deeply connect with your understanding of death and dying. And I look forward to sharing the space with you. So thank you, Madeline. And I would like to share what I am doing in Japan with some of the pictures so that you can imagine what it's like that I am, so that you can see the visual image of what I do. So the House of Joy that Madeline has shared is right in the middle of this hospital, which this Kawamura hospital is a general hospital that take care of the patient who has cancers. Like we do surgeries, chemotherapy, and to cure people. This is Kawamura Hospital, and we have another place called that takes care of the people who are at home with home medical care. So the doctors and nurses go to the homes to take care of the patient who has difficulty to come to the hospital. And then here we have hospice that we started 2 years ago, where we take care of the patient who is in the critical stage of their symptoms to relieve the pains and sufferings of their mental and physical pain. And then in the middle of these three doors, we have this House of Joy, which is not a medical place, but it's a kind of like community space where people come to share and then understand what they value in their life. So this is House of Joy, a caring environment for the cancer patient to receive support to be themselves. You know what, you are treating your sickness, but most of the patient feels like treating their sickness is the most important thing that they have to devote all of their time and energy to do. And that is true. But if your life just becomes treating your cancer, your feeling gets heavy, and then you sometimes lose why you are doing this care, like difficult care, sometimes very painful cares. But if you have this place like House of Joy to come together and then talk about your value, life value, and then pressure that life value as well as treating your sickness, you find reasons why you need to take care of yourself. You find reasons to live yourself. And then that gives so much energy to continue difficult moment that you have to face. So I worked in the big hospital and then learned the very important jobs that the big hospitals have, which is to treat patient in very short time, very accurate diagnosis, and so the patient, the work hospital's job is to not to care or give like comfortable environment, but more focus into how to cure quickly your sickness. But that is a very big job that hospital needs to do. But at the same time, I wanted to take care of their hearts and mind. And when I tried to do that in the hospital space, that the time movement of the hospital and caring movement of this is energy is very difficult. That it was difficult to do in the one place. So that's why we started to create different environment for different reason for the patient to come and take care of themselves. And this is what House of Joys work. So we invite lots of community wisdom keepers, like people who have technique of massaging, like aromatherapy or yoga, or we invite religious leaders to really speak about spiritual pains and how to deal with spiritual pains, or nurses. And so many of the community wisdom keeper come to support this environment together with the medical staff. So this is House of Joy. It's been 4 years since we started, and nearly like 3,000, 4,000 people visit to really think about and deepen about who they are and what they want to do in their life. And then this is the place of palliative care unit. Here it's called Here and Now, because it's the place where people come and enjoy and have precious moment of here at this moment, this place now and here. And it's a place to give physical and psychosocial care for people battling with cancer. So we started 2 years ago, and we have seen nearly 300 people leave, pass of the passing. And there are many different kind of stories behind these patients that we encounter. But what I want to share today is that their lives will be different, so their last moment is all different. And it's so important not to conclude, what is good death, or it's so important to know that there is somebody in the world who can give answer to what is death and dying. But think that, like a child, to continuous curiosity, hold the curiosity and find the spaces like here today to continue the conversation and journey toward deepening the understanding of death and dying. So I am here today to really create a place and space for people who are here today to wonder and to think and find an opening heart to talk and think about death and dying. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Maki-san, for those opening remarks. So many provocative questions that we are holding alongside you. What is a good death, etc. One of the things I was struck by was the words, some of the words that you were using. Wisdom keepers, house of joy, here and now, and in your experience with having worked with so many people, we are curious if there have been instances that have brought you pause. for example, the story that you were sharing with us of a businessman on our pre-call, and I'm wondering if that is something you're feeling able to share uh, with our larger audience today.
Ye- Yes, yes, thank you very much. So I was listening to all the past story awaken talks of like Nippon and Van Karma lectures tomorrow of their death and dying. And when I was listening to Nippon's talk, you know, I don't know if you recall this, but he talked about this like no ground, foreground, background, and home ground. The process of awakening our awareness and how that connection with the fear. So as the fear shrinks, the awakenings get bigger, and then that will move you from no ground to home ground. And when he was sharing this, I remember one businessman that I met in the hospice a year ago. So he was the CEO of a big company, and so he had control over all of the things that he has done throughout his life. And then he was diagnosed with cancer, and then he was also diagnosed that his life is a month left to go. And when he heard that, he came running into the house of joy, and then he felt, when I met him, he was at this no ground state, like as though he lost all of his ground, all of the reason to stand on by his foot. His consciousness was taken over by fear, and then he, without introducing himself, he just came and he said, my life is 1 month to go, and I don't have any families to take care of me, and I just need to know how to get into the hospice of here and now. And that's all I need to know. And just find a way for me to get into the hospice of here and now. And that's exactly how he spoke to us. So if he's like a businessman and who have created a big companies, he would usually, introduce himself, and he would be, it's like these are like his common, he's able to do all these stuff, but with big fear taking over his life, he was in this no ground state. So we invited him to sit on the sofa, and then we said like, it's okay, we will find a way for you to get into hospital. So please don't worry about it. And please share about yourself, your story, your life. And then when we started this conversation, he started to talk about who he is and what his life was. And then this was kind of like foreground state, where it's like there's sense of me, like you gain back your ground, and you feel like I am in my body. Yeah, like he's sharing this story of who he is. And then his fear became a little bit shrink, and then his awareness became a little bit bigger to realize that he's not a fear, but he's himself. And then we find a way for him to get into the hospice. And then when he was in the hospice, his fear became a little bit more smaller, because the hospice was a place which was much more comfortable than what he was imagined. So he went to the next stage, which is background state, which is there is my body, and then he has sense of control over his body, and your body becomes background, like I am me, and then body is kind of background of you. So your awareness is a little bit bigger than your body. And then he started decorating his room with paintings, and he's bringing furnitures from his home. And then his room became like his own like bedroom. It was so different from other rooms in the hospice. And then he started connecting with the people, the nurses. And so he was a big businessman who has controlled everything of his company and his workers. And then he told me that he has never appreciated anybody in his life because all of the success was done because of himself. So he said, I never ever had any gratitude towards anything. But he thought like everybody should gratitude him because he has paid everybody to work for him. And then he has made beautiful product for the community to be thankful of. So there was no need to thank anybody. But when he came to the hospice and he started saying that he realized that there were things that he was not able to do by himself. At first, he became so sad. And then at first, he went back to foreground state because he lost control of himself. He was not able to go out into the garden by himself. He was not able to eat by himself. And then he received a support from nurses and then realized that how thankful it is for somebody to support him to be himself, to able to do things that he wants to do. And then he said, I never felt gratitude to anyone, but I think I'm learning something new at the last stage of my life. And then he told me that he wants to give gratitude to all the people that he met or all the people who has caused him trouble, who he fired in the past. He wants to call up all these people and then thank them. And then he just not said that, but he started calling up people, and then every day for the last 2 weeks of his life, he called each one of the person and gave gratitude to all these people. And as he gratitude all these people, he started understanding that there are so many beauty in his life that he never realized. So his awareness became much greater. And then that there are, even though somebody he cut his connection with, by gratituding to them, he realized that there are so many people who has still connected the heart to him. Even though he cut the connection with that person, the person still connected with him. And then realized that his existence is more than his body. Like his existence is there even though he stopped connecting with them. And then realized that his existence is more than physical body. And then as he experienced all these process for 2 weeks, he realized that his body is nothing more than just a thing. But what's precious is his awareness and then his consciousness and then his being. And I think when he realized that, he went into home ground, which is everything is in his body, and then the body's existence dissolve and the border between me and you disappear. And that was the last, moment of his life. And then the and then when the last day came, he thanked last person on the phone, and then he said that I have succeeded so much in my business, but the most calm moment that I have is this last 1 month where I diagnosis with cancer, and the big fear came, but after the fear, all of the realization I received was the most calmful moment that I had in my life. And then he went, that was the day before that I had conversation with him. And then he went to different stage the next day. And then when I heard Nippon's story, I realized about this person. And then he really represented this 4 stages that Nippon talk about. And then truly the amount of fear and awareness has this kind of balancing relationship. And as your awareness grows bigger, your fear becomes smaller. And there are ways to make your awareness bigger. There's a practices like Zen Karma Lecture Tsumo has shared. There are so many practices in the world to put more focus in your awareness. So when some of the big fear affect your life, you are able to work on that and then really connect and find a way to make your awareness grow. So thank you.
Wow. There are so many rich, deep, moving pieces to what you're sharing, Maki-san. Um, and I have a bunch of questions coming up. I will restrict myself to only two. You repeatedly speak about fear, and one of the fears I've had, and I've had people speak about, is is uh, is death of those who who are not necessarily old, and of course young old is a spectrum, but there is an understanding that death in old age is inevitable, but death at a younger age, there is something deeply saddening about it. And I'm curious as to if you have a perspective to share on that with us. And the second question is that, which is in some sense related, that sometimes people are able to reconcile with the passing on of a loved one, but uh, it is the manner of the passing on, and it can be anything. It can be an accident. It could have been due to a COVID infection. It could be because a plane that was supposed to land somewhere has not landed. How does one make peace, in your experience, uh, with the manner of someone's passing?
Okay. I really thank you for your deep question, and I really hope that I I really hope, like I started in the beginning, that I don't have answer, but I think answer is in each one of you. And I really would love to let you think as well as what, like when I share this story. Maybe I'm able to share because I have met so many people who have passed away, or who have met people who have lost their children. So I'm able to share by stories. But this is just a opening inquiry so that you are able to start thinking, what is it? What does it mean for you to lose somebody young, so young? Or what does it mean for you to reconcile with somebody with accident or like COVID-19? I think it's so difficult for parents to let their child pass away so early on their stage. But at the same time, sometimes I really surprised. I mean, not surprised, but there are like a son who is 70 years old who are suffering so deeply, or who are so afraid of losing their mother who is 98 years old. And then I like that grief cannot be, and there are some person who are able to reconcile quickly. And so I really think that the grief, which is more painful, is difficult for me to judge because it's so different. But when you are I love that story that Thich Nhat Hanh talk about death doesn't exist. And he shared like story of he shares like to let you he share like to see the cloud, and if the cloud is gone, are you sad? He asked questions, like when the cloud is gone, the cloud's water goes into the rain, goes into the mountain, goes into the river, and it turns into the water goes into the flower, and it turns to the leaves that's in his hand. So when the cloud is gone, do you cry? We cry because we think the cloud is cloud, and we cannot imagine bigger than cloud. We cannot see the world that there's a story after cloud. But if you are able to start seeing deeper truth to that cloud is gone, the fact that cloud is gone, you are able to appreciate the flower in front of you as a part of cloud, and keep peace, find a peace in your heart. And then this is similar to this fear and awareness connection. Like, how do you keep finding the truth to death and dying? And so that, I don't know if this answers your question, but when you meet with somebody who lost their child, of course I would listen. I would I would stay beside that person with pure love and understanding that that person is in pain. But what's important is, at the same time, you have to be connected to the truth. Like, you don't teach them that cloud is connected to flower, but you are able to leave yourself aligned with the truth in the truth of the world. So you are not drawn into that person, but you are keeping yourself apart from that person, so that person can be lifted up, you know? If you go down to that person and then be painful, be sad together with that person, then this sadness doesn't dissolve. You will be sad. You will have empathy with that person. But at the same time, you need to know that this person has a power to regain this reconciliation of peace within that person. And then when I talk with cancer patient, they say that it's so comfortable to be in House of Joy because we don't teach them anything. We just let them know that we trust that person, that this person will someday, maybe 1 year later, 2 years later, 3, depending on that person, they will regain back themselves. Because we're going to be sending love, we have conviction that that person has strength in themselves to stand up again. So it's so important that we become one with that person, but at the same time, we don't lose ourselves aligned with the truth. If that answers your question.
Thank you, Maki.
Well, let me share you the story. There was this man who lost his son in an car accident. And he has been taking care, he has a professional degree of grief care. So all through his life, he was taking care of people with grieving, suffering. But one day, he lost his son with car accident. And he himself was in deep grief. Like he, even though you're studying grieving, you're not a professional at coping with your own grief. And then he was in his grief, but then realized that he has been preparing for this to happen throughout his journey. And then now is the time for him to use his learning to work with his own grief. And then he asked himself, what am I grieving? What am I grieving toward? And then he said, I'm grieving because my son, who is 20 years old, have passed away, and in his life for 20 years have been very cheerful, wonderful, very happy life. But because how he died all of a sudden, his existence became sadness, suffering. People sorry for him, for his life, my son's life. And I don't want to feel sorry for my life, my son's life. Because I know he had a wonderful life. So how do I deal with this? He asked himself. So then he find the answer. I need to find a way to hold this energy of suffering, feeling sorry, to shift that energy to happiness and joy for his son's life. And then every day until the funeral for like a week, his son's body was in his house for a week until funeral. So for a week, he had a conversation with his family and friends that visited his house to talk about what is the happiest moment that you had with my son. So for 24 hours, not 24, when you are sleeping, you're not able to have this conversation, but for a week-long conversation about how happy his son was. And then he had that for a week, and on the day of funeral, including his family, the feeling of sorrow, the field of sorrow and suffering has shifted to joy and happiness. Of course, the loss of son is sad, but sad does not equal suffering and sorry for that son's life. So he's sad that people are sad, but at the same time, they were able to hold this happiness feeling about his life. That to accept that he had 20 years of wonderful, amazing life. And that really helped him work with his grief. And he still feels sad about his son. But he understands that his sons had a life of a happiness, and his son's life had a meaning, even though it seems short. So this is one of the stories that I would like to share about grieving or loss of young son.
Thank you, Maki. Thank you so much. So I have a question. Many of us have a hard time accepting death. Sometimes death is seen as a failure. If we get ill, we failed somehow because we should be able to heal ourselves to make things okay again. And all of us are going to die at some point. So when we have a loved one who is dying, how do we reach the point of acceptance, accepting it just as it is, and being with that person and with that journey, and knowing when we're supporting them in a healing path, and when it's time to support them in going through their transition and into dying? How do we work through that journey?
Yes, it's I don't know in the history when the death became failure, but it's so true that right now that in this reality, death seems to be failure, especially in the medical field. When in the hospital, when doctor loses somebody, it feels like you have lost the big battle that you should have won. And I think we have to think like Van Karma Leksha have shared. It is so important to think death as not a one. I think it's so important to think that we are living until death. Even death is not a failure, but it's a process for you to live until the last moment. And then because there is a death, it gives power and energy for you to live the moment. it's so important to put death into the position where life is taken by death, but death is giving us life. And then it makes you think like, if death is giving us life, how can I use my life to live my value? How can I experience as much as I am given and live my life until the last moment? So when as I was facing many people's end of life, and then when there are so many people who realize what their life means or what they want to do until the last moment, when they are told they have cancer, like life-threatening diseases, they realize that they wanted to do, like they wanted to quit job, or they wanted to spend more time with family, you know? And then they say like, some people will do that. And then some people will quit their job. If I have only 1 year to go, I will quit my job. I will go traveling around the world. And there are people who are able to do that. And when you meet people like that, they'll say that I am grateful that I have given this opportunity to live my life as who I am and able to do things that I am able to do. And I met so many people who have told me that because I have cancer, my relationship with my family became so much better. Or because I have cancer, I am able to start, I started this dance class that I wanted to do, that I have never made time to do, because I thought maybe I will do after I graduate from university, or I quit my job. But I realized when I received cancer that there's no after, but only now. But these patient that has told me this story have also told me that if I was able to live like this without knowing that I have cancer, that would be much better, And then realize, when I meet so many people who talk like this, that I would love to live like this without experiencing cancer. I thought of having conversation of death and dying is so important. It gives so much power and an energy to live. And then I created this card called this. What do you want to value until at the last moment of your life? This is like 50 value card that lets you know. We sit in the circle and then have communication with family members or colleague from the company and ask question. What do you want to value until the last moment? Or what do you want to value at the last moment of your life? And then we ask people to pick one card and then think why they chose this card. And on back of the card, there's a question that deepens these values. And then when we start having these conversation with people, like there's 10 years, this card can be used from 10 years to 100 or 100 more years old people. And when you start talking about what do you want to value until the last moment of your life, so many positive dialogue can be held with so many close friends and families. And you will understand that there are so many things that you don't know, even though you are spending so many times and hours with these people. And people start to enjoy talking about death and dying topics because it's not something that gives fear or bring fear, but it gives warmth and connections. And death is something that we all experience, but we have never ever experienced in our life. So we can talk about the topics of death and dying without right and wrong answers, without, seeing this person has answered, this person is specialist about talking about death and dying. It's like it gives equal background, it gives like very free topics for children and elderlies to share about, and then we can learn so much about people's different experiences. So we encourage many people to really hold conversation about death and dying. Right now, using these cards to like elementary school, junior high schools, and medical schools, and to learn and to are able to be comfortable talking about the topics of death and dying. And if you're able to know what you want to value until the last moment, then not only yourself but the families and friends knows what you want to treasure until the last moment. Then when you get sick and when you go to the hospital, you don't have to feel like very rigid that you're the only one who knows your value, but you are able to depend on others to hold up values that you treasure with the help of others. So you don't have to feel like there are so many people who fears still death even though they know their values, but it's so important that you have hope that your values are appreciated until the last moment.
Thank you, Maki. Thank you. That's very powerful. Now, I have another question. When someone is dying, the other side of it is their loved ones, and their loved ones who are going through so much pain at just the very idea of losing someone who means so much and seeing their loved one is in pain. How do you and how do you support someone in staying with this person in the present moment with compassion and love and with an open heart when everything that's happening is breaking your heart?
Thank you for the wonderful question. I think that's very important to talk about. When someone is dying and someone is in the process of dying, they will be in the spiritual pain. That pain could be all different. That pain could differ depending on the person. So first of all, it's so important to make it clear what kind of pain, what is the fear that person is holding that is giving that person a big suffering. So when you talk about suffer, what is suffer? We think about like your hope and your reality, and your reality is here and your hope is here. And this gap between reality and hope is usually causing the suffering. So when you see a people who is in suffer, you try to communicate to realize what is the reality and what is the hope, and how can we lessen the gap between reality and hope. And how do you do that? You either lower the hope or you either uplift the reality. And the support can use it in the both way. With a conversation, you can maybe lessen the hope. What does that mean? What does that mean to lessen the hope? So for example, if the person wants to die at home, and then the family are resisting to take that person at home because they are not able to take care of that person, the hope of the patient is to go home and end their life. And the reality is that he's not able to go home. So that gap is there, right? And that gap is making him suffer. So how can we lessen that suffering? Is that you uplift the reality, which means maybe you talk to your family and find a way to get a support from other places, so that family do not only have to take care by themselves, but they are able to feel like, okay, if I have this kind of support from the community, I may be able to take care of my husband at home. That is like uplifting the reality. But if the family is not able to do that still, then we have to lower that hope so that the gap becomes smaller. So how do we lower the hope? We talk to the patient and then ask, why do you want to spend your time at home? This deep questioning, and then see deeper layer of the reason why that person wants to spend at home. And then you start to understand that maybe that person wants to see his lovely garden every day, or he wants to be in the communication with, like, listening to all the family's conversation, to feel that he's connected to the family. There are so many different reasons why he wants to spend his last times at home. And then, but you find clues why he wants to go home. Okay, he wants to have connection with his family. Then we ask families to come to the hospital or stay over at the hospital as much time as possible. Or we take him out. If the family cannot take care of him 24 hours, we find a way for him to go home 2-3 hours per day or something. We find the clues for him to go to let the hope, not going home forever is not possible, but can we let him go? Could we find a different ways to make his hope come true? So by trying to have this kind of conversation, we're able to lessen the gap of the sufferer. And then by trying to have this conversation, the families are able to still stay and then be with the suffering family members. Or there's another way, on different topics, but when the patient is in suffer, they are only seeing the negative side of right now, that they're sick, that they're only seeing that they're losing their identity, they're losing their life, they're in pain. All of these reasons that they're suffer. There's a reason for suffering. And then they're only seeing that part of that side, that their emotions is in suffer. But we have different kind of conversation. Even though that person is in suffering, we are able to talk about what do they cherish in their life, what do they like in their different conversation. And then when it's so surprising that when you start conversation about what do you pressure in your life, what do you cherish in your life, what kind of value you have been encountering throughout your life, many people started smiling. Many people gained their sparkle in their eyes to share so many stories of their life to the people who listen. And so I tell their families to, why don't we start having these conversations about their life, or bring pictures and then start positive conversation, so that he doesn't think his life only as suffering, but there are so many things, positive things in his life that can be acknowledged and cherished with this time that is left in his life.
Thank you, Maki-san. What I'm hearing in a sense is you're saying that hope is negotiable, and the wisdom keeping aspect, is really coming through. Somewhere on the same spectrum that we've been having this conversation, but perhaps a bit further ahead, uh, I'm holding this question around. So whilst all this, in the last 30 or 40 minutes, we've been speaking about um, how might we respond to life when it becomes terminal. I'm also curious if you have any reminders to offer for those of us who are wanting to live or operate from a space where we are fully surrendered to our impermanence and the impermanence of our loved ones. When there is nothing inside, when there is no terminal disease at hand, or in the here and the now, on an everyday basis, what does it look like, feel like? What does living life from that space, um, uh, how is it like to live from that space?
Can you please how might we respond to life
If we are
that
fully surrendered to our own impermanence and to the impermanence of our loved ones,
yeah,
even if there is nothing, there is no pressing terminal disease that we know of, or
yeah,
their passing on is not imminent. How
yeah,
might, yeah, just, is that clear?
yes.
Fatima?
So if your life is not threatened by urgent death, how can you still see the impermanence of life? Is
And
that
yes,
your question?
absolutely, and live from there, having surrendered to keeping it front and center. Yes, yes.
Yeah. So it's so when I go to like universities and then talk about this death and dying, and when I talk to the university student, it's so difficult for them to imagine what is it like to end their life. They're like, why do I need to think about ending my life? That my life is just about to start. So when I try, when I see them, I let them understand, like by asking them, like when you, we well, I don't know. So I ask them to write 25 values that they treasure in their life. So in a paper, I ask them what, any 25. So like people that you value in your life, or memories that you value in your life, or qualities that you value in your life, or things that you value in your life. So anything but 25. And it's so important just to write these 25 values, because many people do not even think about what they value in their life. So it takes time for them to write. And some people cannot fill out the paper even to write, because we live so much on other people's value. We use so much energy to appreciate other people's value. So especially like university student who needs to start looking for jobs, they need to find a way to appreciate the company's value so that they will be hired. So their focus is in so much outside. So when I ask them to write this paper, it takes time, but I ask them to write 25. And then people start to write like their family members, their dogs, or their pictures, or their memories of spending time with grandparents, or their smiling values, or their many values they have. And then and then as the time, so I take like there's a 10 days courses of death and dying. So every time that I have classes, I ask them to take out the paper and then ask them to cross out the values, 3 values, every time the class starts. So they're like, at first they are able to cross out maybe easily, because their values, there's 25 values. But as the values get limited, and then when you have to choose between 5 values to erase 3 values, it becomes so difficult. And then they think like, I cannot let go of these values. And then we start having conversation. What is death and dying? Death and dying is we gain so much precious value throughout the life, but death and dying process is letting go of each values little by little, and then trying to see what's your true value at the end of your life. And then realize yourself that this is the reason that I lived. And this is the reason, and this is all of the stories goes really into one values. And I tell the I tell the student, so, and then at the last day, that value becomes one value. And then we talk about like, this is your value that you want to treasure right now. So what you need to do right now is to pressure that value because that's your reason for your life and that's your reason for existence. And if you're able to go back every time you have to think of different choices, go back to this value and then think if your choices align with this value. And then by doing so until the last moment of your life, you will understand that you have lived your life. And this is the reason why we need to really think about death and dying. And then by having these conversations, the university student finally understood why that thinking of death and dying is important for them, the stages that they begin their new life. And there's another story. Maybe I share this story on the different awakening talk that we had before, but there's this lady who was taking care of her mother at the hospice. And her mother was doing all of the things for her throughout her life. She has cooked, she has listened to her, she has given advice to her, they went to shopping together. The mother has served her daughter fully until the last moment. And then the daughter has went abroad for like 15, 20 years, and they have lived apart for 20 years. And then she had a call from her mom that the mom has a cancer, and then she has 6 more months to go. So the daughter ran back to Japan and then spent 6 months with her mom. and last 2 months of this time, they spent time at this hospice. And when I had a conversation with this daughter, she said, all of the things that I thought that was my vision of mother, all of the things, which is she was cooking for me, she was listening to me, she has, all of that thing that connected with me, with my mom, has disappeared. Because my mom right now in the bed is always sleeping, is not eating, she's not cooking for me, she's not cleaning for me, she's not able to fully give me advice like before. But when I go to her, I feel she's my mom. And then the time that I have right now is given to me to realize what is the value that keeps my mom. So she's thinking, what is the mom's value that she has received that is more than doing, which is giving her mom. And I really appreciate the time that I have right now with my mom, because then if I think about that beside her bed, being beside her, I'm receiving all the values so that I can hold on to, even though my mom's body disappear. And this is a precious time that I receive. So this is a story that why living your value is so important. It's important to you, but at the same time, it's important to all the members that will be left behind, so that we can keep living that person's value on behalf of her, and feel connected through the value, even that person's physical body is gone.
Thank you, Maki-san. Thank you for your vulnerability. That really reached me. The bit about the mother being the mother. That's, there's a lot of tenderness there. We are now ready to invite more voices into our conversation. So me and Marilyn would either invite people to ask their questions or ask questions on their behalf. I have a few which I will presently share, and you can choose to answer them in any order. If there are some which you do not want to respond to, we will fully understand that as well. Um, so Esther has a question around when dying process happens gradually, it is probably easier to spiritually prepare for it. And how does this play out differently when death is sudden? Um, and connected to that, which is the other side of the coin, there's another question from Yashpal, who says that the awareness of death or of our impermanence cannot come in a jiffy. How might we prepare ourselves so that we are better prepared?
Yeah. Um, Thank you, Esther, and for the question. Um, there are said to be 4 different kind of death that people face. It would be nice if I was able to share a graph, but I couldn't prepare for that. But there are 4 kind. One is, like she said, sudden death, like accident or like COVID-19, like you didn't expect they were healthy until the last moment. On that day, suddenly, like, people pass away. That is one kind. And the second one is like gradual death, like when you become weaker and weaker and weaker. So when you, like, this is like when you are old and like 90s and 100 years old, you started not eating, you started not moving, you started like, this weaker and weaker and weaker, and then it takes about 3, 4, maybe 10 years to end your life. That prolonging, very long, slow, natural death. And the third kind is like a cancer, where like until your last 3 months of your life, you are, with the help of the medicine and medical care, you are able to live your life. But for the last 3 months, your symptoms suddenly becomes very weak, and there are lots of symptoms that happen, maybe like vomiting, pain, and then you end your life 3-4 months after that medical care cannot do anything about that. And then the fourth type is maybe difficult to understand, but it's like stepping, like going down the step, going down the step, going down the step. So there's a sudden going down, but at the end you just end, that's the end of life. So what is that? It could be like heart failure, lung failure. So with sometimes you get infected and you have lung failure, your organs get so weak. But if you're healthy, even though you get sick, you can go back to the normal level. But since your organ is weak, you're not going able to go back to the previous stage, but you stay at this lower stage, and then until the next incident happen, which you go down again another step. So little by little, step by step, you're going closer to your death, last moment. So, like Esther says, there is a gradual death and there is sudden death. And so usually there are 4 types of death. And then it's of course it's very hard to prepare for it, because I even don't know. Like, I can wish for certain kind of death to happen for me, but I would not know until what I would die with, until the last moment of my life. So how can I prepare for that? I think I can prepare for that by listening and learning about different way people end their life. And then find the reason, why do I fear if I have this kind of death? Why do I fear if I have this kind of fear? Why do I prefer cancer kind of death rather than sudden death? You start this inquiry within yourself and with others, and then start to understand about yourself, understanding of the death and dying. And then by doing this, you're able to go into the stage that you feel any kind of death will be okay. That is ideal. And that is the place that I want to go. But it's still difficult. Even I feel so difficult. But my hope that by continuing this conversation for 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, maybe at the end of the stage, I realize that will be okay, because I know that not that any kind of the things that's happen in the world, there's not only negative things, but negative things comes with the positive. There's the same amount of positive with negative. And if I said not okay with this kind of death because I only see the negative part of it. But with a conversation with many people, I am able to see a little by little a positive side of that kind of death. And then I can reach the place where I say, that's okay. And that will be great. And that is the reason to have this conversation. Is that okay? Or if Esther has some more question about this, please raise voice or ask me. Or
I think that's beautiful, Maki. That's beautiful. Thank you. That was just so clear and so helpful. And now we have a question from Jignasha, and
Yeah.
I'd like to invite Jignasha to ask her question.
Hello, Maki. Thank you. Thank you really for sharing what you did. My question is around caregivers. What is the kind of what's the role that a caregiver should play when when around dying people, and what is the state of mind and heart one should cultivate to truly be a caregiver, at any time, because we don't know when death is going to come. So what's the heart and mind that we cultivate when we consciously have people around us who are not doing well, and two, to generally, like, even if we don't have people who are dying around us, um, you know how do we, what's the kind of mind and heart we cultivate so that we are prepared to serve somebody who might just uh, need that service.
thank you, Jignasha, for your question. There are many ways that caregiver can train themselves to be able to stay beside a people who is facing death and dying. But one way is to able to understand what you feel about your own death and dying, to deepen the understanding of death and dying for yourself. Because sometimes if you have fear of death and dying, the people who is facing death and dying sense that, and they're not able to have the communication about death and dying with that caregiver. So I think that depth that you can have the conversation of death and dying depend on how comfortable you are able with your own idea about death and dying. Or if you are used to having these kind of conversation with others, that it's not fear conversation, but it's kind of warm conversation. It gives connection to, if you have that idea of having death and dying conversation, if you have that kind of idea towards death and dying conversation, the patient are able to open their heart and talk freely about their feeling toward death and dying. And that gives so much comfort to so many patients. Like, I remember I worked in the palliative care, so I was looking after lots of cancer patients. And since I don't have any, not any, but I have less difficulty talking about death and dying, the young children like sense that. And when the parents are not there, they talk to me about, they talk me about how they feel about death and dying. And I really got surprised with some of the children's insight. Like there was this 6 years old girl who was doing chemotherapy, and she had recurrent so many times. And when the parent, so she had a recurrent again and came back to the hospital, and then she had to do another chemotherapy. And at the end of when the parents were gone to went to shopping or something, I was there in the room, and she said, "You know what? I'm not scared of dying, but so I don't want to do treatment because I'm not scared of dying. But when I talk about this with my parents, they get so sad, and I don't want to make them sad, so I will just go through the treatment." I mean, she was 6 years old, so she was not able to speak this clearly, but what she wanted to say was this message. And so the person that is facing you is able to open their heart if you are able to hold that conversation with that person. There's there's a man who was scared of, very, very scared of death and dying, and he was always having conversation with me that how fearful he is to wait for the death to come, that he want me to end his life right now because he doesn't want to wait anymore. So every time I visit his room, he asks me like, "And please help me end my life," you know? And then we had this conversation, but one day he stopped having this conversation, and I was wondering like why he stopped this kind of conversation. So I asked him, "Weren't you afraid of death and dying?" And then he smiled at me, and he said, "I was afraid of death and dying because I thought there was my identity dissolved into nothingness, and I was scared to face that the nothingness comes after death and dying. But I'm going to share with you because I think you are able to." He told me like, "I will share this story with you because I know you will accept this story, so I'm going to share." And then he shared with me that his brother, who has passed away 20 years ago, has visited his room, you know, and then said, "Don't worry about it, we will enjoy." And that's why I'm not fear of death and dying. But when I told this story to my wife, she thought I became crazy, and she thought I was seeing something that I'm not able to see. And then he said, "I saw him, you know." He said, "This is true, and I want you to believe that it's true. And then this is the reason that I'm not afraid of dying." So when he told his wife about this, he said, no one will believe me, so I'm not gonna share about this to anybody. But since you asked me why I don't fear death and dying anymore, I will share this with you. And I'm so happy that you accept my understanding of death and dying, and this really give me relief, kind of. He shared that. So one big quality, there's so many techniques that you can learn about being beside the patient's bedside, which is like listen carefully, or don't be afraid of silence just because silence gives next phase to the conversation, or give good question. How do you give good question to deepen the conversation? Or there are so many techniques that we can learn about giving good care to people who are being in the death and dying process. But I think the things that we can do every day in our life is this kind of deep inquiry within yourself about death and dying, and then not be afraid to talk about it with your families and friends. And these experience will really help you when you face a patient who is in suffer of death and dying.
Thank you, Maki-san. We have a couple more questions. The next one is from a person who's choosing to remain unidentified, and they're asking that in the process of uh, values reflection, the the when you are sitting alongside people who are transitioning, do you see any common patterns? Are there when they reflect on their values, or do you see that people's values differ from one another?
Um, I will, sh- I will share. I will answer this through my painful experience, which is that I wanted to try to find a way which will make death and dying calmness to every person that face death and dying. So I thought, first of all, I thought maybe relieving pain is the answer to relieve that, to have calm death and dying process. Then I met a person who told me relieving pain increases the suffering, you know? And then there was another time where I thought curing diseases would lessen the fear toward death and dying. But then I met a person who was upset to know that their cancer was cured because she was preparing for her death, kind of. So what I want to say is that there is no common patterns to death and dying process. I think you can see like I shared with you, like 4 types of death and dying, kind of like briefly. Less pain is better, or like having family is better, or having friends is better, or being able to eat what you want is better. You know, there you can see patterns to a better death and dying, but these are patterns. And when you meet one person one by one, the patterns just help you to let the conversation go. But this person that you encounter is all different. And it's so important to know that they're different and to have this curiosity to know what is this person's values. You know, we don't hold, okay, this person is a businessman, maybe this will be his values. So it's so important to let go all of these attachment towards this common understanding, and then make yourself so clear, and then start from the beginning the conversation. What did you value in your life, and what do you want to value right now?
Thank you, Maki-san. One of my own personal touchstones is that there is no one way to dance. What I'm hearing you say in so many different beautiful ways is that there's no one way to die.
Yeah.
And we have one final question. This has been a marathon for you. Thank you. We have one final question, and it is from Chirag. And Chirag wants to ask, and I guess I'm curious too, and Chirag is speaking for a lot of us when he says, "What is your one value?" You know, you've spoken about the 25 values that you took to the college students and for people who are transitioning. And we are curious if you have any one value, and we are also wondering if you can share with us the process with which you arrived at that one value.
So I had this kind of conversation to find the values of many people for over like 200, 300 times, and I had conversation with 2,000, 3,000 people of the values. And every time I hold this conversation with the people, I try to see my values. And the interesting thing is that values vary depending on your life. You know, it's so interesting. But one thing. So the values that I hold differs. Like, if I choose 3 values, with a card, if I choose 3 values, it may differ depending on for example, okay, if I said stay closely connected to my family, sometimes I choose that value card, but when I am fighting with like my husband, I wouldn't choose that value card. So what I do is I write down all the reasons why I chose that value card at that moment, and why I treasure that value at that moment. And all these like histories of seeing what kind of values I value will let me see the trend of how I think about my life and how I value things in my life. Um, that's why I tell everybody, don't just do this. For example, using the value card, don't just do once and then feel that you have done your homework, but just doing this every year or every time you have some kind of life big event, do with your family and friends. And then because by doing that, you go through choosing different value card, you go deeper and deeper into the layer of understanding what's your deepest value. And the deepest value is usually one value. And I think that Chiran wants to know this one value that I treasure. And I think that value that I treasure is enjoy every experience that I encounter in my life. And that is my value. I just open my heart and enjoy everything. And then that includes, I ask myself every time, does that include death and dying process? And I think right now, I can say yes. I open my heart to enjoy every moment in my life, and hopefully at the last moment, even the death and dying process, I will enjoy as a experience, new experience that I encounter lastly in my life.
Thank you, Maki-san. Just taking a moment to breathe that in. Um, we couldn't have scripted a better ending, even if we wanted to. And in this moment, I would just gently invite Rohit to lead us into the closing of our time together today. And thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us today.
Thank you so much, Maki-san. It's like, the deeper we go in the conversation, like you were saying, that it's not like a 90-minute exercise, it's at least a year exercise. It feels like the more and more nuances we keep on uncovering, and we feel that, we could just keep on going and going. So I hope we all, I think all of us who are joining, who are tuning into this conversation, continue to hold this inquiry, and we all continue to do it together, and 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 not try to control things, but approach each moment with a heart of curiosity, with a heart of openness, uh, which, as you shared beautifully in that businessman story, that how uh, when we open ourselves, we could see the interconnection, like the deeper interconnection, even when it seems that we are secluded, we are alone, even when we are not physically together, but the strands of interconnection are so deeply there all the time in our lives, guiding us and blessing us. Thank you so much. And I think just to before closing the call, I mean, I think just you and your entire lineage, they have been such a powerful witness and supporters of that interconnection, I think, just through the power of prayer. So I have one last request for you, if you graciously, I mean, you are always gracious, so we don't even have to think that, would you honor it. So maybe a quick question and then a request is that, like, you encounter so many dying people, right? And like, is there something like, what kind of prayer is there, like a prayer which emerges in your heart when you are seeing so many people transitioning? Anything, if you share on that, and then, like, if you have any thoughts on that, and more so, if you can just close our time today with just a prayer offering, which is your prayer of may peace prevail on earth, we'll feel really honored and blessed. Thank you so much.
Yes, I really appreciate um, people for coming to have this conversation of death and dying. And the pod will start, I think, from April. But last time when we had Living and Dying pod, I learned so much from each participant that came to the pod to share their experience. And I think we learn from each other's understanding of death and dying, what truly death and dying means for you, for me. And we go like onion skin, like layer by layer. We go and go deeper and deeper understanding about death, and that will let us understand much more about life and why we are living. We start to let go all the things that is not needed to experience. We can let go so many things that are that we think are important, which are not so important when you go deeper understanding of death and dying. And I think that is the enjoyable process, and to learn together. So I hope, I think you will learn so much from the pod. It's much more deeper learning than this kind of awaken talk, which is one to many. It's many to many, so deep and beautiful. So I look forward to joining the pod to learn deeper about myself and about each one of you. But I hope if you have time to join the pod of Death and Dying to learn deeper about yourself. And then by learning deeper about yourself, you're able to have the conversation with your family and friends, which your daily journey becomes deep understanding of death and dying and living. So thank you so much. And I work for Goi Peace Foundation, Byakko Shinkokai, as well as working at the House of Joy and the hospice. And I learned by working in Byakko Shinkokai and the Goi Peace Foundation, I learned that prayer or meditation and connecting with deeper truth of yourself really help you to understand that we are more than physical being. When you're in pain, you focus on the physical body, but when you go deeper into the prayer and meditation, you understand that you are much more bigger existence than pain. And this dissolving of yourself, or dissolving your going beyond your physical being, let you open awareness about the truth of the universe and the earth, and it really helps you to keep yourself calm in mind, even though there are so much pain and suffering around you. So I invite you, or you can have your own quiet prayer time or meditation time to connect to your deeper quietness of yourself. Even though there is so much noises outside, when you go quiet to yourself, you understand that there is always a place in you that are so calm, that are so quiet, that are so peaceful. And when you are able to find that place in your daily life, and practicing connecting to that place when yourself, if you're in the suffer of pain, you are able to find that place. If you have never practiced that and then try to find that quiet place in that suffering and painful time, it's so difficult because it becomes, the challenge is much higher. So I feel that it's so important that you check yourself, okay, this is the quiet place. This is the quiet place. And then that little practice will help you when you are in a challenging moment to go back to that place that you know and you're familiar with, to keep your mind aligned with that quiet and loving, deep loving place in your heart. So I do that through meditation, a prayer of may peace prevail on earth, may peace be in may peace prevail on earth, which my grandfather has told me. So I will say this, may peace prevail on earth 3 times. But please, like, you can do whatever you like to go to this quiet place. So thank you very much. May peace prevail on earth. May peace prevail on earth. May peace prevail on earth. Thank you very